In this tutorial, I want to walk you through number 1 of the introductory CAD items. What I've done is I've saved the PDF to my desktop. I would encourage you to access this document through your iPad because it's really nice and easy way to pinch and zoom in or out and access the document on a separate screen where you can now maximize your screen real estate when working through this. So I'm going to navigate back and forth through the PDF that's on my desktop, but I'm going to walk you through this process. So when I first look at this document, I need to acknowledge the fact that there are 2 separate tick marks indicating the dimensions of this object. It's either a whole unit, which is the case on this left edge, the bottom edge, and the right bottom edge. And the tick marks along the back edge here are all half units, and across the top are half units. This one in the top right corner here as well is also a whole unit. I can sort of see this visually. If not, when I go through this process, I'll also realize when I go to push-pull and change a dimension that this being 1, 2, 3 units would not be the same as 1, 2, 3 units over here because, well, it would go all the way through. The push-pull would take you all the way to the bottom. So you'll see that in a second. But I'll walk you through the process and the tools that I would use to create this object as efficiently as possible. So I'm going to get started here in SketchUp. I'm going to start off with my line tool, and I'm going to encourage you to start and place all of your objects at the origin. It's always an easy place to locate your object if you got zoomed too far out or way too far in, and it allows you to find your object quickly. The origin doesn't move. So getting started here, I know I got a 7-inch long line across the bottom, so I clicked the origin, dragged in the red direction, typed in 7 and hit enter, and I now have a 7-inch long line that comes across the bottom of along my red axis. I also know that this object is 4 in depth in the green direction. I'm going to come over here and snap back to my green axis and close this surface. So I have this gray surface that's snapped in. And moving on to the next tool, the push-pull tool, which I introduced in the previous video, I can now pull this up to the appropriate height. Appropriate height of this object is 3. Common problem that I'm seeing where people run into, mistakes that they make if I look at this object. Yes, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 tick marks, but you're measuring distance, which is the distance between 2 points. So you're measuring the space 1, 2, 3. So this is 3 inches high, not 1, 2, 3, 4 tick marks and 4 inches high. Just be careful that you don't count this incorrectly and put the wrong dimension into your object. All right, so I have the overall size of my object. Now, one thing I like to recommend people do is to work subtractively when creating their objects. Especially when getting started. There's going to be times where you got to work subtractively and additively, but in this case, I want to cut away from the full size of my object. I think that's a pretty efficient way in which to create this object. So one way you can use the pencil tool is to create a measurement, and I already showed earlier that it's 1 inch in width along the right edge of this object. So I'm going to type in 1 and hit enter, and I now have the ability to create a line across this surface. And I can see all of the marks that I've made. That's a 1-inch wide line that I've indicated, and this portion is going to be push-pulled in the center. On the far opposite edge, if you don't do this in the middle, a problem people often run into, and I can show you how to navigate this issue. If I draw along the edge 1.5 inches, which is where I want to put my next line, I can't see a line on top of an edge. And that's not a problem. If I drag along this surface, I'll get a blue dot. That's the midpoint of that 1.5-inch long line that I just created on top of an edge. If I continue dragging, oh, there's the green endpoint. So that's the 1.5-inch long line that I couldn't see. I can still find by snapping to those nodes, those endpoints that pop up on my cursor tool. So this is now 1.5 inches. This is 1 inch over here. I'm now going to navigate to the push-pull tool by hitting the letter P. You could also go over here and click the push-pull tool on the toolbar. And I'm going to drop this surface down the appropriate dimension, which is 1.5 if you count the tick marks. All right, so there's the start to my object. And currently this is probably the most efficient way in which to go through creating this object. I'm now going to come over and push this front corner back. If I hit 3 inches, and then find that green node, which is the endpoint of that 3-inch long line. Got to be careful which node you're snapping to. You can draw a vertical line and then push-pull back 1.5 inches this front corner, and you get the overall shape of this object. All right. I'm going to navigate back. I'm going to hit the other window here. And taking a look back at this shape, I got my 1.5 inch push-pull taking place. Whoops. I navigated to the side there. Sorry. I have all my appropriate dimensions: 4, 7, 3, 1.5, 1. Okay, I think everything looks the way it should. Now what I want to do is to identify the location for these circles and then push-pull, or apply the circle tool and then push-pull the circle through this object. These holes go all the way through, and the locations are identified by the tick marks that are given. What I want to first do is note that this edge comes all the way out and is in line with the outermost edge of this circle. And this edge runs straight through the middle of this circle. So using that, I can determine where the center of these circles should be. So I'm going to do the circle in the back first. It's 1 inch in from the back edge is the center of that circle, and it is aligned with this edge that carries straight back through the middle of that circle. So, oops, I got to undo that. Command Z. I accidentally clicked. Fix that. 1.5. All right. So if I come in here, knowing that if I carry some of these edges straight across the object, that's what I just did as I carried a straight line back. I'm also going to click and come back that line 1 inch. Now there's a green dot that pops up. That's the center of my circle. So when I navigate using this tool, I don't want to be on a blue dot, which is a midpoint. I want to find the endpoint of that line I just drew. Sorry. And these circles are 1 inch in diameter. Now when you activate the circle tool from the list on the left-hand side here, kind of pretty obvious, looks like a circle. But when you use the circle tool in the bottom right-hand corner, it's asking for the radius. I just told you it's a 1 inch diameter. The radius is half of that. So I can type in 0.5 for ½ inch, and it should snap a circle of the appropriate dimension. At this point, you can use the eraser tool or the selection tool, and you can delete these portions of line that you do not need. And I'll go back and I'll take a look at that drawing once again to see if I can find the location of this circle. All right, ½ inch in from the edge, or 1 inch in completely. And I'm going to draw a line across at that point to see roughly where this goes. If you have to assume something in any of these drawings, you need to assume it in a half or a whole dimension. So the distance from this edge to the edge of my circle, I'm probably guessing that that's a ½ inch. Definitely on this side, it's definitely more than on up against this edge. So I got to play around with it a little bit. I don't have a really well-detailed dimension for that location, but if you're going to assume something, you have to assume a half or a whole in all of these drawings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in the appropriate dimension, which is 1 inch. Find my 1 inch mark. And then I'm going to come across. I'm going to just attach all the way across here. And I'm going to come back in 1 inch, knowing that it's a ½ inch radius. That's going to give me the center for my circle. So I'm going to click and I'm going to drag out here. I'm going to type in 0.5. And there's another 1 inch diameter circle, as the dimensions indicate. I'm going to clean this up to see how it looks, if it looks similar in its size and shape to the other drawing. All right, so these look pretty good. They look close to one another. The one thing I can do is I can put my object in the exact same orientation, the view, to see if these look and line up exactly the way I want them to. Documents are typically indicated or demonstrated to us in isometric views. And so what we need to do is turn this into an isometric view. What I need to do is tell my camera that instead of looking at this in a perspective view, an isometric view is a form of a parallel projection. So I'm going to turn parallel projection on, which is going to change the view a little bit. And then I can also come down here to standard views under the camera, standard views, isometric, or command 7. And it snaps my object into the same view as what they're using in this PDF document that I've provided you with. And what I'll notice is that the corner should actually rub right up against the edge of this circle. And overall, this object now looks much more correct, having put it into the proper three-dimensional view, or a similar three-dimensional view that was used in that document's creation. So I'm going to drag this down Suggestion for using the push-pull tool on making holes through an object is don't just push down and stop anywhere randomly. I know I want to push-pull this, and I want it to end at the bottom edge of this surface. If I click and do that, you can see my hole goes all the way through. If I do not do that, Command 7, if I click down, and I can no longer see where this is going to end, if I go too far, you can see it's going to pull out the bottom, a circle out of the bottom of this object. This push-pull goes all the way to the bottom edge and then creates a cylinder out the bottom. I'm going to hit Command Z and undo it. So guessing somewhere in the middle here is not an accurate way to go. If I push-pull this and I select anywhere along this bottom edge, if my node is active on that bottom edge, the push-pull will happen only down to that bottom edge, and then it will stop, which will cut us a nice clean hole. So that's a quick recommendation. Need to navigate around this, make sure there's no other lines. If there are, I should go around and select them and delete them. All that I want is this solid object, no additional edges or lines associated with this object. I'm going to hit Command 7. Again, I'm going to make sure that I have this set to a parallel projection, which should look identical to that original object. And I like the way this looks. So I'm going to save this, and I have completed object number 1.